Hey guys, it's Selwen here, and we have finally reached the finale of this ranking series, talking about last but not least, the healers. Now, like the previous ranks, we're gonna talk about which healers are the most fun to play and where. So before going any further, let's talk about all the changes that has come to healing classes. Like most specs in BFA, BFA? Screw you all, you bastards. So the biggest change is a global cooldown one, and the stat squish, but you probably already have it in the pre-patch and you are experiencing all of that goodness. Yeah, so without any further ado, let's get straight into it. The Holy Paladin. Now, the Paladin is here not because it's feeling dreadful in comparison to the others. In fact, I think healers in general are feeling pretty decent. You don't really have any spec suffering the shadow or enhancement syndrome, but one spec needs to be last, and out of the bunch and the changes that we had in BFA, I feel that the Paladin is the one that suffered the most. Now, you still are a good healer, you still bring an amazing toolkit in utility, especially for dungeons. Your blessings and auras do really good there, and in some situations in raids as well. You are also one of the most durable healers in terms of survivability, and can still dash out some decent damage to help out when needed, but the actual healing part of the spec is where it suffered the most. So what baseline changes we got? Not a lot, but Holy Shock as a baseline 30% chance more to crit instead of the double chance. Avenging Wrath not only increases healing and damage but also crit at 20%, which is great for us, and Judgment increases the damage of the next Crusader Strike or Holy Shock, but only once, plus a bunch of number changes. Your Aura Mastery also suffered heavy changes, but for that we need to get to the talents. So here let's just go straight to the auras because anything before stayed the same. Devotion Aura now gives a 10% damage reduction to all allies, but reduced by the number of players within it, so a nerf from the 20%, but when you activate it, the aura still goes to that 20% for all of them. Aura of Sacrifice was the one that suffered the most, still permanently redirecting 10% of the damage nearby allies are taking, although the damage that you take now is reduced by half. But when you pop Aura Mastery, 30% of the damage gets redirected instead and reduced by 75%. So in Legion, if you don't know, the way this aura worked was as a big raid-wide cooldown, one that Pallies actually lacked, and it would essentially spread 15% of all the healing that you did to one target evenly to all members. When used properly and stacking with other CDs at the right moments, could wield amazing results and was quite a fun thing to do as a Holy Paladin. Now that said, one can argue that the talent was practically a must for most, although not all raiding encounters. So I understand the change, plus the sacrifice name makes more sense now, but we cannot deny we lost one fun thing we did as healers, as now we don't really have a substitute for that raid-wide cooldown, not in the same way at least. And not to say that the new version sucks, because it doesn't. There is some good situations where it will work amazingly, and you can pop a defensive to smooth the damage that you take, but personally not as fun. Judgment of Light was also nerfed to only affect 25 attacks instead of 40, further reducing our raid-wide healing. Awakening comes from a Lego. Light of Dawn has a 15% chance to pop Avenging Wrath for 10 seconds. It's a fun talent as it was a Lego, but RNG procs is not something I find that useful for healers since you want predictability, not randomness. So getting that win proc when nothing really is happening isn't that good, right? It works. Avenging Crusader is probably one of the most fun additions to the Holy Pally. Replaces your Avenging Wrath, so your main CD, becoming a Crusader of the Light, and an Ultimate Crusader of the Light, increasing Crusader Strike, Judgment, and auto attack damage by 30%, and decreasing their CDs by the same amount. Additionally, a Crusader Strike and Judgment heals 3 targets for 250% of the damage and lasts for 20 seconds. So quite cool. Even in dungeons you can pull out some deep spike comboing with Other cities, like Holy Avenger, and the heals provided so that the city puts out when you do that damage are actually really quite good. Although actually doing them doesn't take much out of you, is literally just clicking 2 buttons on cooldown with the occasional Holy Shock, but aesthetically is quite cool. For progressing like raids and stuff, might not be that viable. For anything else, seems to work and is quite fun. And then on the last tier you get Divine Purpose, which is just an awful place to have it because one, Beacon of Faith is just too good in raids. Even though you can live without it, it makes wonders. And Beacon of Virtue is amazing for dungeons. So Divine Purpose can work, but taking it is gonna be tough. Overall, the Holy Paladin is fine. Again, just feels worse than in Legion. The loss of aura, of sacrifice hurts the most, along with Divine Purpose changing tiers. And in general, it's also feeling quite slower. Part of it is gear, obviously, but the GCD change also made Holy Pally slow down a bit, which doesn't really feel good. But again, remember, you still are a really tough healer, even though we did lost our big HP pool buff, so makes things like Sacrifice and Martyr, the healing, worse. But still with amazing utility and survivability tools, and of course you still excel in targeted healing, such on tanks or just sniping people with your big heals, which is quite easy to pull off with your Holy Shock mechanic, and no other healer can compare to you on that front. The Restoration Shaman. Now Resto, like the Paladin, is once again not feeling like crap. It's still good, however what it brings, it's quite, let's just say, limited, in the sense that we do have amazing cities that's still here, and our raid-wide healing is just amazing. We have CDs that no one else has, like Spirit Link or Ancestral Protection Totem to some extent, and again, I cannot emphasize it enough, we have the best tools to top people off in raids, especially when our mastery kicks in, and if they are not too spread, right? Now in dungeons is where I feel Resto Shaman lacks. It's too much based around CDs and AoE healing, and on fights when there's too much movement and people are spread, it won't work as it's intended, and this often happens in dungeons or in some raid fights. Nor you really have a single target utility like CDs, like some other healers possess. Now that's based on healing only. I still feel Shaman is quite fun to play in dungeons because you can do so much more than healing. You have pretty decent damage to help out, you have an interrupt on 12 seconds, which no other healer has, you have an easy stun to use, a slow, a purge, BL, so you're still valuable on that front. But besides that, what baseline changes have we got? Well, Tremor Totem is back as an extra utility to remove fears and whatnot, and your Stun Totem is now baseline, and we also got Earth Elemental back, and that's it really. So talents is where you get some new things, like Earth Shield makes a comeback, a buff that you can add to anyone, usually the tank, where each hit is gonna trigger a heal and increases your healing on the same target by 10% more. It's a classic, so it's nice to have it back, helping with tank healing for the most part. Echo of the Elements was nerfed as it no longer grants the potential extra charge on Riptide, quite a sneaky change on this one. Gust of Wind has been removed now, as you probably already know, further limiting your mobility, kinda like the Paladins. Isn't all that great, but you do have Spirit Walkers, which can do wonders. Nature's Guardian is the new one to help with your survivability in general, which, unlike the Paladin, is rather poor, healing you back up whenever you get below 35% of HP. Downpour is replacing your artifact ability, Gift of the Queen, healing up to 6 members on this sort of burst heal, but costing mana, and doesn't have that extra heal that the artifact had after 3 seconds. But it's only on a 5-second cooldown, but each player healed increases it by another 5 seconds. And it's good, however where it's placed is rather crap, because this was an excellent ability to use with your Cloudbursts, which is now in the same tier. Not only that, Cloudburst replaces Healing Stream Totem, which isn't a big deal, but is nice having this sort of weak hot sort of heal that Healing Stream was to just throw around. On top, you won't get Gift of the Queen copy paste. nor do you get Ancestral Guidance, which was another cool talent to mix with your Cloudburst, since it was removed. Now that said, there is some potential with this new Cloudburst, as if you take Echo of the Elements, you do get 2 charges of Cloudburst, so it kinda evens out the nerfs, but at the same time I much rather have 1 charge of it and just have a more powerful Cloudburst to use with other abilities like the old Gift of the Queen and Ancestral Guidance, and just use all of that when most needed and not really get this second charge that I might not even need. Flash Flood now makes your Tidal Waves buff more interesting to reduce the cast time each time you consume the buff, which is alright, not as good as before, but good for dungeons nevertheless, since you cast a lot of single target heals there when people are spread for the most part. So all in all, Resto Shaman, it's fine. You are a valuable asset in raids due to your cooldowns, and raid heal, you're still amazing at that. Although that's about all the reasons that people want you. In dungeons, you also bring cool things like I said previously with the interrupts and the damage and some utility, but in terms of healing on itself, there's better specs out there with much better single target CDs, which are so useful in Mythic Plus. Mix that with not so great survivability and the lack of mobility. That said, again, I feel there's more cool things you can do with your Resto Shaman in comparison to the Holy Paladin, especially on the cooldowns like Cloudburst. It's not as powerful nor as fun as it was in Legion, but if you know what you're doing, you can still wield pretty amazing results. The Holy Priest. Holy has always been that rather easy to play healer that always works for practically any situation, but always suffered in survivability. Like the Shaman, you are squishy, but much more so. Now, not to say that your healing is poor. Again, you have amazing healing abilities, from single target to AoE, to direct healing to your natural hots, to big heals or small. You really do possess a tool for any situation. So on baseline changes, your Master Spell had the cooldown increased to 45 seconds, which is an amazing utility tool to have. Your Psychic Scream Fear has returned, and Symbol of Hope has been made baseline, improving further the Holy utility. A China-like ability restoring mana to any healer in your raid or party. This was a talent in Legion nobody took, even though it was rather useful, so it's nice to have it baseline. A Guardian Spirit, which is your amazing tank cooldown or just single target cooldown, was boosted as now gives 60% extra healing from 40%, and the cooldown went down to 3 minutes, although I think your traits already did this. Your Serendipity, which reduced the cooldown of your Holy Words abilities, has been renamed to Holy Words, which is more fitting but works all the same. Holy Nova now heals a bit as well, but not something that you're gonna use on a regular basis. On talents, you now get an improvement to your only defensive, and that's with quotes on there, as isn't really a defensive now, is it? A Desperate Prayer to reduce the CD when taking damage. This was a trait that you already had in Legion, so not much to it. Cosmic Ripple was another trait to AoE heal anytime your Holy Words have their CD refreshed. Alright, Circle of Healing went down to the same tier as Binding Heal. I do still prefer it as it benefits my Holy Words, while Circle of Healing does not. Benediction went down a tier, and also I feel it's better placed here with other AoE healing abilities, except for Divine Star. What's Divine Star even, right? And then on the last tier you get Apotheosis, which is a really great CD and was improved to have the CD of only 2 minutes. Light of Nanaru is now here, which actually makes sense. It further reduces the Holy Words cooldown buff by 33%, so you get the choice between having that passively or just get a CD that makes those Holy Words super short. Or between that you still have a new Holy Word, which is just an amazing raid-wide CD. Holy Word Salvation, healing every player, kind of like Revival from Monks, but is on a cast time, applies Renew to all of them, plus 2 stacks of Prayer of Mending, so yeah, an amazing CD. However, is on a huge cooldown of 12 minutes, but its cooldown is reduced for 30 seconds each time you use a Holy Word spell. So that is Serenity or Sanctify, not your regular heals, so it's gonna get reduced nicely if you're playing properly. All of that said, I feel this last tier is pretty cool with nice decisions to make depending on the situation that you're gonna find yourself to be in. Overall, I feel that Holy is a pretty amazing healer overall. It did lost interesting things on traits, like most specs, but also gained some others. Only place where it really suffers still is survivability. So defensives, as it very much lacks them, and doesn't really offer a very high skill ceiling to improve. You've got your cooldowns, which are rather simple, just pop and forget, and holy words are things that you can maximize, but not overly, and that's really about it. But unlike the Resto Shaman, you can work great for either dungeons or raids with your healing tools and CDs and overall utility. Even damage is something that you can dash out easily if nothing else to do. Just in Mythic Plus can sometimes get a bit hairy with the lack of defensives. All in all, it's just a well-rounded, squishy healer. The Resto Druid. The Resto, kinda like the Holy Priest, is another pretty simple healer to play, and for the most part in BFA is playing the same, although some changes to the core use of your spells. So the first big changes here are Healing Touch and Living Seed, which was that heal that was applied on crits. They are removed. A Healing Touch is understandable, it was an ability rarely used, it had its niche, but for the most part was worthless. Resto is all about HOTS after all. Living Seed, on the other hand, does change a couple small things, such as your Omen of Clarity proc, as sometimes you could use that regrowth to apply a Living Seed in preparation for damage. Now you're just gonna use it for the HOT, but for the most part isn't a big deal either. Regrowth in turn changed, as now costs less mana and no longer has the higher chance to crit, since that was placed in order for Living Seed to proc more easily. And the changes to the mana allows you to use it as an emergency heal when HOTs aren't cutting it, without draining it as much. Embark, your single target CD to reduce incoming damage, had its cooldown reduced to 1 minute. Your Tranquility also got some buffs, as now each heal applies a HOT on top, which is gonna allow you to benefit from Mastery easier, which, if you don't know, your heals heal for more when there's HOTs active on the target. So in order to make Tranquility better overall was to multi-dot as much as possible before you pop it. And you still want to do that, but now it's easier to do so since Tranquility naturally adds it. You also gain 2 new abilities, Hibernate as a CC to beasts and whatnot, and Soothe to remove enrages, and yes, it works with the raging affix, so pretty cool on that. As for talents, not much has changed as well. Tiger Dash has replaced Displacer Beast, which personally Displacer was more useful, but it's still pretty good mobility to have. Stonebark has changed places, and remember it will now get the cooldown of Ironbark to 45 seconds, so that's really quite short for a single target CD. And on the last tier we now get Germination and Flourish, which both have upsides and downsides from being in this tier. Germination being here, it's cool as allows you to get together with Spring Blossoms, with some more HOTs overall in comparison to Legion, for more benefit from Mastery. However, not having Flourish with it kinda sucks. On Flourish itself, it also sucks the fact that Gahanir, whatever you want to pronounce it, was baked into it, which is easier to use for most players. However, I really hate it, as there was situations where you want to use the Flourish part of the ability, but not the healing part. So now you just use it as a pure way to get more healing out, and more often than not, you're gonna use it for such, not really for the extension. That's just kind of a bonus now, removing part of what made Resto more fun and more engaging overall in Legion. Photosynthesis is a new one, and at first I was like, it's okay, kind of boring, but after playing with it, it ain't that bad. So it has 2 benefits. One gives a 5% chance for it to bloom when applied on a target, or if you apply on yourself, will make all of your HOTs active tick 15% faster. This overall adds more engagement with your Life Bloom play and your Druid, as now you can use it on the tank just so he gets more heals, but when there's group damage or raid damage, you change that Life Bloom to yourself just to make all of them rejuves and etc. tick faster, and in turn healing for more. So it can actually be fun, even though the other choices probably gonna take the cake in most situations. The Resto Druid, like the Holy Priest, is rather a simple healer to play, and once again a very well-rounded healer with a tool for any situation. And unlike Holy, isn't squishy at all, and actually offers a bigger potential in dealing with mechanics by using its variety of shape-shifting, like the bear and the cat. In comparison to Holy, I think it offers better potential in terms of gameplay as well. Your Flourish and Ganir is more streamlined for sure, but the way your HOTS work with your mastery together with all of your heals and even with the new photosynthesis and your CDs to some extent, it offers pretty cool decisions to make in just creating better and stronger heals for everybody. And yes, it does get to a point is rather spammy with your rejuves, but taking everything else in consideration on what the Resto Druid offers, I think is a more well-rounded healer than the Holy Priest, or of course the previous specs, even though your targeted healing isn't the best. That said, no spec is perfect, and on that, it takes the higher spot. The Discipline Priest. Now, Disc in Legion was actually one of my favorite healers. The things you could do with it once you got into it was amazing. That said, in terms of healing output, was actually one of the weakest. That said again, no one can deny that Disc was amazing at preventing damage or predicting with your shields and abilities. I mean, that's what the spec is all about. Something that also makes Disc more unique in comparison to the other healers is the fact that most of your healing comes from damage with your atonement mechanic, further emphasizing the uniqueness of Discipline. That on itself made a healing spec that won't appeal to everyone, but in BFA, the spec overall has become far more streamlined than in Legion. In general, does feel easier to play. There is still a learning curve for sure, and predicting damage by knowing the fight is something that does take some practice, but also is quite fun. But overall, it is more simple this time around. So baseline changes like Holy Mass Dispel had its cooldown increased to 45 seconds. A Desperate Prayer has now been given to Disc as well, along with Holy Nova, but your Plea and your Mastery have been removed/changed. The reason for that is that your Power Word Shield has returned to being this ability that does not have a cooldown. So it's a weaker version than the one in Legion, even the ones that we had in previous expansions, but now is your way to effectively spread your atonements, much like your Plea worked, but better and easier since it's a shield, plus much more fitting to Disc. Pain Suppression had the cooldown reduced to 3 minutes. Rupture now changed since your shield has no cooldown, and now just makes those same shields 200% more powerful, so you kinda want to use them in the same way, and the cooldown went down to 1.5 minutes. And your Atonement is now stronger as well, healing 60% of the damage instead of 40%. As for your masteries, now Grace just increases how strong your heals and absorptions are on targets with Atonement. On talents, some changes as well. Sins of the Many was sort of a trait to increase your damage by 12%, but diminishing per target with Atonement, so more healing overall. Contradiction is actually rather neat when you heal with Penance, so when you target a friendly to heal, not an enemy, heals everyone with Atonement. This actually makes it valuable to cast a Penance as a heal, especially during moments in dungeons when there's any mob to hit. On the last tier, there's Lenience. Targets with Atonement take 3% less damage. That might not seem like a lot, but in a raid setting, that adds up by quite a lot. Or Luminous Barrier, replacing your Power Word Barrier to, instead of being this shield that you apply on a location, it just becomes a stronger Power Word shield pretty much that instantly applies on everyone, working better for fights where the barrier is useless if everyone is going to be spread. So a really good addition to actually have a pretty decent raid-wide CD as Disc. So again, Discipline Priest is that healer that heals through damage and is all about predicting instead of reacting to incoming damage, which in the hands of good players will wield amazing results. Now more, since your shields went back to being spammable, although be warned, again, they are not as powerful as they were in the past, such as WAD or even Mob, and also things like your new Rupture CD or Luminous Barrier, hell, even how Atonement works. Losing the big burst heals from Light's Wrath does feel like something is missing, but once you get into the new playstyle, you will soon realize the potential the spec has to deal with incoming damage, mechanics in general, and on that is what makes it so fun to play and valuable to a raid group or just a group in general. I highly recommend for you to try it out if you found the Legion version to be too complicated, as now it is much simple. The learning curve is still there, although not as high. And finally we get to the Mistweaver Monk. The Mistweaver is probably the healer that went through the most changes, and in my opinion for the better. Now first of all, I wanted to profess that yes, Mistweaver in beta is feeling quite strong, in fact quite OP, and is most likely to get nerfed. So take that in mind, but the reason why it's on first is just how it's playing, and all the choices and decisions that you can make as a healer are amazing, not just because of numbers. Some really great things came to Mistweaver, which, like Disc, was not among the most powerful healers in Legion, so it's quite a nice turn of events. Many issues here in the Mistweaver were probably the most annoying. So what has been changed? Well, starting with something simple. Leg Sweep is now baseline, so extra utility for dungeons. But on the healing side, Soothing Mist is no longer this sort of infinite channeling heal. I firmly believe this must be the best version of Soothing Mist to date. It still functions as your filler, if you missed weaving, that is. You click it, it channels a weak heal, draining mana for the duration every few seconds, has no cooldown, but doesn't last for very long. So you can freely click it, get a few ticks out of it, move from something, go back to it, whatever. But the biggest benefit of it comes from the fact that it makes your Vivify or Enveloping Mist instant cast, but on that target only. Plus, has a chance to trigger your Mastery Gusts of Mists, which, if you don't know what that is just this extra heal that you get when you use most of your healing abilities. Now, to understand the benefits of those instant casts, let's talk about those other abilities that have also changed. Well, for one, Effuse is gone. Since Soothing Mist is kind of filling that role now. Enveloping Mist still is that expensive heal ability that gives a strong hot, plus increasing overall healing done, but remember Soothing Mist changed, so it doesn't get cast automatically when you use Enveloping Mist, so you have to press it yourself after. If you wish, you don't have to. Renewing Mist is now on 2 charges and is even a more integral part of your healing, as now it allows your Vivify to multi-target heal. So Vivify, instead of just healing 3 targets at random, it heals your main target plus the targets affected by Renewing Mist, further benefiting from proper use of that same spell, leading to pretty amazing AoE healing in some situations. One that doesn't happen automatically, but one that you feel that you actually worked towards it. Thunder Focus Tea also has changed in turn, adding an instant heal when you use Enveloping Mist, increasing the duration of Renewing Mist by 10 seconds, Vivify to be free still, or make Rising Sun Kick have its cooldown reduced by 9 seconds, further benefiting the Feast of Weaving playstyle.
The Feast of Weaving playstyle.
Life Cocoon also got its cooldown reduced to 2 minutes, and Essence Font has stayed the same, but the Gust of Mist's double heal now benefits you more with the way your Vivify and Renewing Mist now work. On talents, you also got some changes as well, especially to the 2 unique ways to play your Mistweaver. Fist Weaving, where you become a healer that mostly stands in melee range, dealing damage, throwing some kicks and punches whenever possible, and getting some benefits, or Mistweaving, your typical healer. Mist Wrap is now here, just improving your Enveloping Mist. Spirit of the Crane and Manatee are now in the same tier, and this is basically going to define if you want the Fist Weaving playstyle or the Mistweaving one, although Life Cycles is here if you think Manatee is something that you don't need. On last tier you now get Upwheeling, improving your multi-target healing every 6 seconds. You don't use Essence Fonts, your next one channels for 1 more second. Plus, the duration of the hot is increased by 4 seconds, further improving that Gusts of Mist's buff. Or Rising Mist, instead improving the Feast Weaving playstyle, as now Rising Sun Kick heals any target with Renewing Mist Essence Font or Enveloping Mist, plus increases the duration by 2 seconds. And you remember the new Thunder Focus Tea, right? So Rising Sun kicks are now a thing that you actually have to think about when using. Overall, what I think is so much fun about Mistweaver and what makes it such a great design healing spec is the weaving part of it, as your heals and abilities kind of function like the other monk specs, as in they synergize perfectly with each other together with your mastery, almost like comboing heals and abilities is what you want to do on a Mistweaver, and when you do that properly, you really see the results and it's so satisfying. Mistweaver along with Disc can be considered the most complex healing specs, as here, if you don't properly use spells such as Renewing Mist, your overall healing, especially in a raid setting, is gonna suffer quite a lot. So on that, it keeps you constantly on your toes, not just on the healing side of things, but what button you should be pressing next. Then there's obviously the mobility that you have, the survivability, the utility, the choices in talents to go more offensive with Fist Weaving getting specific benefits, but also completely changing your gameplay, or just be a pure healer and just focus on the Mistweaving part. The options in general feel quite endless. But basically, healers are all playing pretty decently. We get Holy and Resto on the last spots, but they are there because I feel they are the healers that suffered the most in the transition and lost a lot of their interesting gameplay mechanics. They are still very much valuable though. You still want the Holy Pally and the Resto Shaman in your raid group for sure. That's not gonna change. After that, we have the Holy Priest and the Resto Druid, which are generally overall great healers. Holy is still very squishy, but has a tool for everything in terms of healing, even though it's a very simple healer to play, and does bring some unique abilities as well, like Guardian Spirits, a Leap of Faith, and etc. Resto follows that up pretty much, although it isn't as squishy, and its shapeshifting allows for things like soaking on bear or mobility with the cat, and can do almost anything. Then you have the Disc Priest and the Mistweaver, which can offer all of that to some extent, but in its gameplay and mechanics, in general, the things you can do in the hands of good players, if they get tuned properly, can really offer amazing results, something that the healers before can lack. Overall, I feel they are the most engaging healers, even though something like Disc and even Mistweaver in particular, the Fist Weaving side of it isn't for everybody, but that's why you have the other specs there for you. Just because you're not on the first two doesn't mean you're shit. You're all pretty amazing in their own right. So yeah guys, that covers the ranking. Following videos might mostly be about BFA, still choosing your main, most likely will come up next and seems fitting to me. After that, maybe some BFA prep videos to get you guys set up for it. We'll see. So remember to like and subscribe to get all of that and hit that nasty bell button. And as always, thank you for watching. Have a fantastic day everyone, and I'll see you all next time. See ya.